I previously posted a rambling about the topics around the video title, and I'll link it in the video description box. So you're going to have to just watch the video and read the comments. And I'm going to presume you've done that so I can reduce redundancy and just get to some of the points that I had as a follow-up after that video and reading all of your comments. First, I think I'm even more confused than I was before, but I want to continue hashing it out because for me, it's not the answer that matters, not really. It's the journey, and it's really interesting to hear other people's journey and how they arrived at the answer for themselves. I learned so much from people's journeys, their reasoning for why they think one way or the other, and I'm not so much interested in their final opinion. You know what I mean? Ultimately, whether someone self-identifies as an atheist mystic or doesn't, how they define the word atheist, that's not as important to me in terms of that final answer. What I find so valuable is hearing their process, hearing their deliberative process, their reasoning and their own experiences, their insights. That part is what's informative. The biggest contributor to my confusion was probably how we were all operating with very different and not agreed upon definitions for some of these terms that I was just throwing around willy-nilly, like atheism and theism, polytheism, what it means to have faith. For example, when I say I'm a theist, I don't mean that I think of Guan Yin Pusa or Kuan Yin as like literally looking like this, that there's someone who looks like that floating around in the skies. If we're going to sit down and have an esoteric theological conversation that's a little bit more serious and nuanced, then at that point, I would say I think of Kuan Yin as energy. She's an intangible, self-aware energy. And in this universe, there is a network of energy, different hubs. So there's sub-networks within the greater networks, right? But there's a network ultimately of energy that connects all of us or all things in this universe that produces sentience. And so when that energy is enlivened in one contained physical matter, like my body, it enlivens me and it's described as my soul. Off topic, the way I look, the way I manifest, personality and physical appearance, and also the most likely statistical or probable ways I engage with and interact with other bodies in this universe is based on my soul's karma. And again, karma I think of as just another descriptive of some form of energy that is the operational vehicle for what's fueling movement of energy throughout this universe. But that is connected to a collective of some kind, that energy network. Kuan Yin is essentially a consciousness in that network of energy. For the most part, she is in the collective unconscious, and for most people, you cannot activate that energy or you choose not to, whatever the reason might be, but it's just not active. Then certain people choose to or feel called to activate that energy, and you can bring that energy from your collective unconscious into your conscious mind. Certain people can then become embodiments or emanations that are more concentrated with that particular energy. So they have Kuan Yin consciousness or Amitabha consciousness. If I dare, Aphrodite consciousness, Metzli consciousness, that sort of thing. And simultaneously, in one sense, Kuan Yin and Mother Mary consciousness are completely separate, because the process that it takes to activate it from the collective unconscious into your personal conscious mind and become an emanation of that, to have some sort of conscious, self-aware connection to that particular energy, requires a different pattern of culture and history, or cultural and historical understanding. So in a sense, the invocation process is different. And so God, goddess, divinity is energy. And because it's something that we're all connected to, but then it manifests in our physical bodies, and our physical bodies have the ability and power to interact with other physical bodies and matter and create changes in the physical world through the consciousness, it's both. So divinity is both something physical because it can become physical through some form of consensus reality, maybe. I don't know the details. I'm not saying I know everything, but it can become physicalized, manifested, physically manifested in some way, but it's also just energy in the collective unconscious that certain people can take certain types of that energy, divine energies, and activate it into their personal conscious mind. I wonder, I'm not concluding, I am assuming, so there are assumptions here, but I wonder if maybe somebody who's coming from a more, I guess, the legacy of 18th century age of reason, Euro-Western Christianized thinking would see that and be like, oh, that's just psychology based. And you believe that it's not irreconcilable to hold that particular type of belief or that derivative of a belief and be atheist. But then for me, weirdly enough, I can hold that belief and say, I'm not an atheist, I'm a theist, because I believe in gods, goddesses, and spirit energies, immortals, fairies, gnomes, jinn, egregores. So by that definition, because I believe in a world of spirits and consciousness, because spirits equal consciousness, because of that, and it's not scientific based, it's not logic based, it's intuitive based. It's sourced from some level of psychic knowledge, not as in I'm a psychic, but psychic knowledge. I don't know what that means. Because of that, I'm a theist, not an atheist. And then if you believe that, I would define that belief as theism, as belief in gods and goddesses, whether or not, irrespective of whether you characterize gods and goddesses, spirits, as personal gods, rather than just chi life force. Yeah, this is what gods and goddesses look like. Another really interesting fundamental difference in presumptions, I suppose, or how we conceptualize theism is when I talked about mysticism and theism and then went straight into conversations about polytheism and was just focused on soft polytheism versus hard polytheism, admittedly, primarily because that's the language being used on Witch Talk. And it appeared to some people that I left out the factor of monotheism, whereas in my mind, I don't think I did, because for me, I identify actually as a monotheist, but then I'm also a polytheist, and in no way do I find that to be hypocritical or contradictory. It's kind of like that big philosophical or theological question, is Hinduism and Taoism, and even to an extent Shinto, are these types of religions monotheist or polytheist? In the ways I think an outsider observes ritual practice and the religious observances, it appears to be polytheist. And I wouldn't disagree with that. They are polytheist. But at the same time, the internal understanding of the practitioner, the observant of these religions, would not personally see it as polytheism. We understand it as monotheism. Hinduism, Buddhism, Taoism, you could make the assertion that they are at the heart of these religions monotheistic. Shakti, for instance, is the principle of a cosmic divine source that is a singularity, but Shakti is understood to manifest in many different, separate, and distinct emanations, those flames. The single flame is actually Holy Trinity, a Tridevi. Oh, of course I have to show one of my tarot cards. That's not really working. Haha, here we go. Mahakali, for example, is an emanation of Shakti. So it's Shakti, but it has also spun out to form its own separate self-aware concept of itself, but then it's still Shakti. Mahakali, Kali, Durga. Kali and Durga sourced from the same flame, but once they become lit as separate candle flames, they take on self-aware, unique personality traits. That's not the right word. Religious scholars will also talk about the different cultural and historic origins of Kali and Durga. But then there's also this contemporary equivalence made between the two. So as a theist, how I conceptualize it is it's both. And because I acknowledge and honor the many different candles, does that make me a polytheist? But then if I acknowledge and honor that all of these different candles are sourced to the same flame, does that make me monotheist? And I guess when I'm talking about being a theist to practice forms of mysticism, ultimately to me, it's not relevant how you conceptualize polytheism or monotheism as long as you are some form of theist. You believe that there is a God energy. And even if you see God energy as a form of consciousness that you do not readily have access to, that requires some form of ritual work in order to manifest the emanation of that consciousness, to me, that is still theism. But apparently, to some people, that is atheism. Back to the example of Guanyin Pusa, Kuan Yin. If we're having one particular type of conversation, then I will talk about Kuan Yin consciousness and the emanation that is self-aware, that is in the collective unconscious, but then can manifest in real material ways that creates material changes in the physical world through activation of collective consciousness. And forms of ritual activates those particular types of consciousness. So particular invocations, particular ritual patterns will activate particular consciousnesses. I'm so bad at explaining this. Oh my God, is anyone still following me? At the same time, and without hypocrisy or contradiction, if we are having a conversation about Guanyin or theism or deity at a different register, then I might talk about Guanyin like this. At some esoteric level, I fully understand that Guanyin Pusa doesn't literally look like this. And yet it is very important for me to conjure up that particular imagery of her for me to activate personally aware consciousness of Guanyin consciousness. That's why in the previous video and earlier in this one, I believe I keep talking about the importance of culture and history and how culture and history matter and how they inform the way we connect to the gods, because we dress up our divinity through culture and history. The process of activating particular consciousnesses from the collective unconscious is through dressing up that energy with culture and history. All of this ruminating this week had me wondering about another question that's tangential, somewhat related. Okay, I'll begin with a hypothetical. So let's say you take turmeric or ginger or some other form of curcumin. I think it's a curcumin rhizome. You take the curcumin rhizome, turmeric, for example, plus a mulberry, plus a berberine compound. I think it's called the berberine compound, alkaloid compound. It's similar to goji berries. It's found in central China. This is kind of a well-known holy trinity in Chinese medicine, traditional Chinese medicine, believed to cure cancer. Zero scientific proof. They cannot prove this with science or medical technology. But it is an enduring, well-known trifecta. Is that the right word? Trinity. We'll stick with Trinity. Trinity that begins the medical concoction for a cure for cancer. So that's the Holy Trinity, the three. You then augment the three and create a 5-ingredient cocktail of some sort. And the other 2 ingredients for this 5 are 2 ingredients based on the 5 changing phases, the wuxing, that are going to be more specific to the type of cancer. So if you have cancer, you begin with the Holy Trinity, and then you add 2 ingredients to treat the specific type of cancer that the individual has. Zero scientifically proven medical evidence of this. Will it help you? Will it hurt you? Is it a poison? Who knows? My question is, and I don't have answers, I really don't. This really is a sincere question. If you are a true atheist, would you take that medicine? If you take that medicine in an attempt or with the intention of trying to cure an ailment that you have, knowing full well it is not backed by science, does that mean you're no longer an atheist? I don't know the answer to that question. That's why I'm asking it. I think it's a really interesting thought exercise. Because at first you think one answer, you want to rush to answer that question, but then the more you sit and simmer with the question on a philosophical level, the harder it is to answer, isn't it? In terms of spiritual practices and atheism, this also stumped me a bit because I think it depends on how you characterize your intentions for particular exercises. For example, let's take yoga or meditation. If your intention is for yoga to just literally be physical exercise, nothing more than that, I don't see that in any way as spiritual or religious. And you can absolutely be atheist. It doesn't even matter. The theist part doesn't even matter in terms of just doing exercise. It's like, do I have to have a conversation about religiosity when I do jumping jacks? Same with meditation. If you're using meditation as a form of being able to calm your mind, calm anxiety, I don't see that as a spiritual or religious practice. But if you are using yoga to activate chakra and to talk about prana, that's a different story. Now you're getting into religion, I would argue, because you can't scientifically prove the existence of prana or chakras. So that is a mystical practice by reasoning of your intentions for pursuing or endeavoring in that particular practice. Just like if doing jumping jacks is part of the religious ritual I go through to activate consciousness of a particular divinity, then when I'm doing jumping jacks, that's a religious practice. But otherwise, it's not. That's kind of how I conceptualize it. Same with meditation. What is your intention for meditating? And that determines whether or not it's a mystical practice or not. By its own, on its own merits, it's not mystical or not mystical or whatever, right? It becomes mystical based on your intentions for endeavoring in that particular practice. Something is a ritual or something is not a ritual based on the intentions that you've set. That was a very long-winded way of getting to the question. So if you are doing yoga because it's good exercise, we don't have a question here. But if you are doing yoga with the intention set for it to be a spiritual cultivation, and you are doing yoga to feel your own prana, your own chi, life force, and to activate or cultivate the strength of the different chakras in your body, that's a mystical practice. So intention matters. So to simply say, oh, I can be atheist and do yoga, or I can be atheist and meditate, I think that misses the boat on the main inquiry. Is tarot reading a mystical practice? It depends entirely on how you're using it and the intentions that you are setting. If you're using it just as a way to mind map and to jumpstart your own creativity, and anytime it seems to tell the future, it's a form of confirmation bias, and that's all you see it as, that's not a mystical practice. There is no inconsistency in my mind with being an atheist and reading tarot. Now, if you believe tarot holds some ability to connect to divine consciousness, to higher self, to something that you cannot prove using any form of science, then tarot has become a mystical practice. Reading the I Ching, Book of Changes, cover to cover for its philosophical value is not a mystical practice. Using the I Ching Book of Changes to communicate with ancestors or to divine the future, to receive prophecies from the divine, that is a mystical practice. Likewise, if you're out somewhere in Mother Nature and you're just like, gee, wow, this is so beautiful, and you're acknowledging the huge difference between your size and the size of Mother Nature, and that produces some level of awe. It produces just emotions that are very beautiful emotions. I don't see that as mystical, and it is consistent to be atheist and be like, wow, Mother Nature is beautiful. But then if you ritualize your experience with Mother Nature and you personify Mother Nature during ritual, that's a mystical practice. If you're atheist, how do you assign spiritual value to nature? And so the question still stands, based on intention setting, can you be a mystic and an atheist? Anyway, I just wanted to jump on here this Saturday morning and share my thoughts that have culminated after a week of thinking about these topics.